What's up guys, my name is Mark Steiner and today I'm going to be talking to you about why the Sony A7R III is the best camera on the market. The Sony A7R III came out this month and was announced last month and is a direct competitor to the Nikon D850, which was announced very recently as well. And they're very similar in many regards, but the A7R III, in my opinion, is better. Now, it has 3 megapixels less. It has a 42 megapixel sensor compared to the 45 megapixel sensor of the Nikon D850, but it has so many features that you just cannot get on any camera that from a non-Sony manufacturer. So you get 10 frames per second on the A7R III at 42 megapixels. You get 1080 at 120 frames per second, so some beautiful, gorgeous slow motion. You get 4K 30 in both full frame as well as APS-C, and you get an amazing new battery, an amazing autofocus, amazing EVF, all from the A9 that we have in the Sony A7R III. And it's something beautiful to see all the features from the A9 as well as the A7S II come together in this beautifully powerful all-round camera of the A7R III. Now, the Nikon D850 comes in at $3,300, which is $100 more expensive than the A7R III. It shoots at 7 frames per second straight out of the box. It has a 45 megapixel sensor and can do 1080 at 60 frames a second. So already the Sony has blown it out of the water, save for those 3 megapixels. And I think it's a much better camera overall, especially for video. In video, the Nikon struggles with autofocus beyond compare. It's the worst of the big three in the industry, in my opinion, as well as the fact that this doesn't come with any log profiles. The Sony comes with S-Log2, S-Log3, as well as their new HLG, which is for high dynamic range, and you get all of this built in. Now, if we move on to the D5, this is a $6,500 camera, and I still think that the A7R III is a better camera than this. And because if you look at the specs, the A7R III is better. The A7R III shoots 10 frames a second, the D5 shoots 12. Yes, 2 frames a second, but the D5 is also a 20 megapixel camera, and this is pushing 42 megapixels. That's more than double the resolution at just costing you 2 frames a second. So you can shoot sports with the A7R III. For video, you're getting 4K 30 in both, but the D5 can only do up to 60 frames a second in HD, which is unfortunate because you can't get that crispy slow motion. It also cannot shoot full frame video. It can only do crop, which is very unfortunate in 4K. And the fact that it's more than double the price is also a deal breaker. If we look to Canon's competitors, we have the 5D Mark IV, which is over a year old at this point. Out of the box, it shoots 7 frames a second. It comes in at about $3,200, so about the same price range as the A7R III. It's a 30 megapixel camera, so it's about 12 megapixels less. And it has the capability to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, but Canon's motion JPEG codec is unusable, so that kind of goes out the window if you want to shoot a proper, easy editable 4K footage. And it also is maxed out at 1080, 60 frames a second, so you're not getting crispy slow motion footage either. And if you want log profiles, you have to upgrade to a $100 upgrade to send it into Canon to get that log profile, which is ridiculous, because the Sony comes with all the different log and HDR profiles. If we go to the 1DX Mark II, which is considered to be one of the best cameras on the market right now, that camera comes in at $6,000. It shoots at 14 frames a second. It's a 20 megapixel sensor, similar to the Nikon D5. It shoots 4K 60 frames, which is one of the only cameras on the market to do that. Again, it's cropped, which is unfortunate, but it does do 60 frames. But it's still using that unusable motion JPEG codec, which means that you're not really shooting in 4K if you want to edit it easily. But it does do 1080 at 120 frames a second, so you do get that crispy slow motion. However, it's $6,000, and the fact that Sony has done more to put in the A7R III at $3,200 makes this incredible. And the fact that it's pushing, again, more than double the megapixels makes this a better camera in my opinion. I don't need those extra 4 frames a second. Now, if we look to the Sony lineup, we have the A9, which is the best that Sony offers. So they say. I still think that the A7R III is a better camera than the A9 because even though it only shoots at half of the frame rate, the Sony A9 undercuts the competition significantly at $4,500 compared to the $6,000 of the 1DX Mark II and the $65,000 of the 5D, the D5. So you're getting a much cheaper camera and a much smaller body with a lot better specs. But it's a 24 megapixel sensor, which again is better than the 1DX Mark II as well as the D5. And it shoots at 4K 30 frames a second and 1080 at 120, but it lacks the ability to have any picture profiles. So you don't get S-Log, you don't get any cine profiles. And it was a big deal when that was omitted from the A9, which we don't know why Sony hasn't put those picture profiles on, but that's something that is in the A7R III. And again, I don't need 20 frames per second, which is ridiculous. 10 is more than enough for me. So at 10 frames a second, I'm getting 42 megapixel files compared to the 24 of the A9. I'm also getting the same video features as the A9, except I have S-Log and HDR profiles, so I can use that and do that for that more cinematic look instead of having to work with the default picture profile, which is great out of body, especially with Sony's brand new color science, which is the best on this camera because they've tweaked it even more from the A9. So the color science is more in line with Canon and Fuji, which are regarded as some of the best colors in the industry. The A7R III also has technology that no other manufacturer is using. Neither Nikon or Canon have made a camera with in-body stabilization, and they can't because of the DSLR. It has that mirror in it, so you can't actually move the sensor like that. And even coming down from the A9 has a 5-stop in-body stabilization. The A7R III has a 5.5 stop in-body stabilization, which means you're getting more stable footage for video. You're getting better low light compensation because you can shoot at slower shutter speeds and still know that you're going to have that in-focus, non-blurry shot because the sensor is moving with your hand movements, which is very beneficial. And then we come to battery life. This is something that has been vastly improved on the Sony A9 as well as the A7R III because they use the same new battery. This is one of the sore points of the mirrorless industry, especially Sony cameras in the past. And with the new battery, you are getting on par or better performance than the competitors. If we look at the 1DX2, which has one of the best batteries ever made and is always touted as the gold standard for battery life, their battery is 2,750 milliamps, which comes in at $160, which is good, which is great. The Nikon D5 battery comes in at 2,500 milliamps and is $150. The Sony A9 and A7R III batteries come in at $80 for 2,880 milliamp hours, which means you're getting more battery life for a cheaper cost. And if you get the optional battery grip for either the A9 or A7R III, that means you can put 2 of those batteries in there, which means you're getting over 5,000 milliamp hours on one use of the camera compared to the 1DX Mark II and the D5 from Nikon. You're getting over double the battery life if you use the same setup that they do. And if not, you're still getting more battery life out of this, a smaller and cheaper battery compared to the bigger camera competition. So for me, it just makes sense to go with Sony because of all of the new perks that the A7R III boasts compared to the competition, and the fact that I'm not shooting Olympic sports and don't need a 14 frames a second, 12 frames a second, or the A9 20 frames a second, which is ridiculous. I was hoping for 7 to 8 frames, and I got 10 frames per second at a 42 megapixel resolution, which is unheard of. And if you go to the D850, they have an optional battery grip where you can use a D5 battery and it ups it to 9 frames a second. But that's an additional $550 for that ability to get 2 frames a second more and a slightly more battery life. and you're still getting significantly more battery life out of the just one battery on the A7R III. But if you use a vertical grip, you're getting more than double, which is ridiculous. So again, the A7R III is the best camera on the market, especially regarding the price, the fact that all of the specs are amazing, amazing new video autofocus, amazing new stills autofocus, all those video picture profiles, the dual SD card slots, something that is now a professional camera. With the Sony A7R II, you couldn't count on it to shoot weddings or important events or sports because it was limited to 5 frames a second, so you couldn't really shoot action. And you could not rely on it for a professional gig because when you're shooting a wedding, you want to have dual SD card slots. You want that instant redundancy. In case anything happens to one SD card, you have a backup and you're not going to lose your client and be like, hey, you don't get any wedding photos because my SD card failed. That is unacceptable. So now that this has dual SD card slots, it's a much more professional camera that is capable of much more. And with the new battery, especially with the battery grip, you are never going to run out of battery life. So overall, the features and the price point of this camera just make it an unbeatable camera, in my personal opinion. You can't get anything better than that on the market for the resolution, the speed, the price, the video functionality. It's just an all-in-one package for a great price that beats the competition to no end. Alright guys, that's it from me. Let me know in the comment section down below if you like these longer rant videos about different specs of different cameras, because I love to do them. And I'm a huge nerd when it comes to comparing cameras. So definitely let me know. My name's been Mark Steiner, and I will see you next time.